Hey everyone, today I wanted to bring a different sort of topic to my channel. This is how I create DIY sort of minimalist line art. I'll use it for lots of stuff, whether it's printing it out on sketchbook paper for sketches or something to do with like a phone background, or sometimes I use them as my iPad backgrounds. That's usually what I use them for actually. I wanted to show you how I make them. So what you need to get started is your phone or an iPad or some sort of tablet that you've got that can download apps from app stores. You need a stylus, or you can use your finger if you're really steady. I prefer an Apple Pencil with an iPad, but that's just a personal preference. There's lots of different things you can do. You can get pretty cheap styluses on Amazon, so if you don't have an iPad or something compatible with an Apple Pencil, you can use a stylus, and usually those work pretty well. And then you need the app. So I use Procreate on my iPad. On my phone, I have an iPhone. There's the Pocket version of Procreate, which does pretty much the same thing. It's just a smaller version. I believe it's available for Android as well, if I'm not mistaken. So that's what you need to get started. And then once you get started, you need a high quality image. Um, Typically, with minimalist sort of body drawings, you just want to search either men or women's, or in general, if you're not looking specifically for one of the many genders that there are out there, really. You can just search photography poses, and a lot of times you'll get a lot of photography of different bodies in different positions. Some of them are clothed, some of them are not. I typically do nude photography poses. For the sake of this tutorial, I did not do that. I chose a fully clothed model, but that's what you need. And you want the photo to be pretty high resolution. So what you're going to do first steps is, as you can see me doing here, you want to import the photo into your software. Blow it up so that you can, size it up on your screen. Then you're going to want to create a layer. You'll see me pretty quickly here create a layer. That layer just goes over top of the photo. Then you just draw on it. I use a sketching pencil brush, and I start sketching the outline of it. I usually start with the hands or the feet if they're in the photo, or whatever is the most intricate detail of the picture, so that I know whether I can do it or not, if that makes sense, because I sometimes bite off more than I can chew. Hands and feet for me specifically are very difficult to draw, and so if I can get the hands and the feet drawn, then I can draw pretty much any other part. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm focusing on the things that are the most complicated and drawing those first. And then once I draw those, I move on to things like the legs, the arms, the chest. Any other part of the body is usually pretty easy. As you can see, it's a pretty rough sketch here to start. It's just a general outline, and you'll go in and clean it up later when you're, doing your final sketches. This is a base layer that you can follow after you get rid of the background image. So basically what I aim for is getting the lines of the body right. So the external lines, the sides of the legs, the sides of the arms, getting all those. And then when it comes to things like, you can see the bone in the ankle or your knee or parts of the chest that aren't specifically defined, I'll just kind of go in and throw in a line anywhere I can. Now you'll see when I try and draw the underwear on the model, it's not difficult, but I have a harder time drawing clothes, just because they're kind of strange to me. So because I don't typically draw clothes, like I said, I usually use nude photography as my reference picture. I just kind of stick to the folds of the fabric. If there is a fold in the fabric, you get a line. It doesn't have to be complicated or super specific. The point of minimalist drawings is for them to be minimal. You don't need hyper detail in those sorts of things. So once you get the outline, usually it's good enough. When it comes to things like shadows, I'll show you a little bit more what I do later, but shadows, if there's a lot of them in the picture that you've chosen and you like that picture, feel free to do it. But when it comes to the shadows, just make sure any part that is shadowed, that is darker than the rest of the photo, you outline it and you create a complete closed shape, so that there's no, there's no way for the color that you're going to put in there later to escape. So as you can see in the abs, there's a couple spots that are a little more shadowy than others, and so I've made a complete shape that is closed off in there. The same thing with the nipples. I make a complete closed shape so that then I can go in, fill those in, and give them a little more definition than they would have normally. I also, when I draw the face, it's minimal. It's not your typical hyper realistic drawing that you would think of when you think of drawing a face. I try and keep it as simple as possible because the simpler it is, the better. So what I do is I draw whatever far edge there is to the face. And then after that, I'll draw in the eyebrows. I'll draw in a curve for the nose. And with the lips, they're too complicated. So I just draw a little bit of a half line to show where the lips would be, and that's it. For the hair, I usually just kind of make squiggles, and it works out good enough for who it's for, which is generally just me. And that's pretty much it for a sketch. So as you can see, we've got a rough sketch here, a rough outline. Then I go in with a different brush, which is an inking brush. And the thing you want to note about inking brushes is when you go in with this app specifically, you can double click on the brush itself. So when you select the brush, select it again and go into the settings, and you want to select streamline. For minimalist line drawings, because there's not a lot of detail, you want all of your lines to be as smooth as possible. So go in there and turn streamline up to 100%. What that does is it makes it so that the lines are smoother. So when there's small variations in the way that you move your stylus or your finger or your pen, whatever you're using to draw, it smooths those lines out so that you're not getting quite so jittery, squiggly lines. You're getting smoother lines. I also do that for my sketching pencils. It's not as important, but it does help me to just have a good guideline. And what I do like to do is when I have two lines that meet, I'll usually go in at the intersection of them if it's a little messy and just kind of clean up the overlap, because I don't want a whole lot of overlap. I do want to be able to tell that it was hand drawn, but I don't want it to look messy. So look out for overlap between like where the two legs meet or where the toes meet or something like that. If you get a bunch of overlap, then it starts to look like too rough of a sketch. But as you can see, I'm drawing the feet. I'm not putting a whole lot of detail in them because they're not the focal point of the picture. And even if they were, too many details puts it in a weird kind of in-between place where it's not realistic, but it's not quite minimal. And then when it comes to things like curves of the calves, curves of the feet, curves of the arms, or of the chest, it's always better to exaggerate just a little bit than to go under, because if you don't do enough, then you end up with what looks like a glorified stick figure. But if you go a little over what was actually in the photo, a lot of times you just get a better realization of what you're actually supposed to be looking at. When it comes to hands, I typically don't draw fingernails. I don't draw a lot of lines in the hands. I'll draw the outlines of the major fingers that you can see, and then maybe a shadow of another finger, just so that you know that it's a hand, but not so detailed that, again, you get into that weird sort of in-between place. Arms are kind of the same way. Some drawings that I do, I like to do a lot of heavy shading and a lot of shapes that kind of show shadow and show definition. I chose this picture specifically because there weren't a whole lot of shadows. It's a pretty well lit photo, and you're not going to get a whole lot of variation in the tones in the picture. That's easier when you're starting out. If you're just starting out sketching and you're not super confident in what you've got going on, I would really highly recommend, when you look for photo references, don't pick ones that have a lot of lighting differences, a lot of shadows, a lot of peaks and valleys when it comes to the lighting, because you get into the territory where the shadows kind of make all the difference in the picture, and if you don't have those shadows, it just kind of looks like a blob. I get that a lot when I try and draw like close-ups of a part of a body, like a shoulder or a close-up of the chest. A lot of times shadows play a big role in that drawing, and if you don't get it just right, you end up with a blob. As you can see with the face, like I said, just some general lines. That's really all you want. You don't want to add a bunch of lines and a bunch of definition, because you get into that weird in between space, the kind of uncanny valley sort of feeling, if that makes sense. It's not uncanny because it's not going to be even close to realistic, but it kind of looks like you're trying too hard and that it's not the style, if that makes sense. You want to make sure that it's stylized. And that's pretty much how you do a sketch. That's really it. Is you sketch it out, and then after that, follow it up with a finer ink-like pen or an ink-like brush, and you've got your final drawing. Now, I do want to show you how sometimes I will define shadows or define different types of looks when it comes to lighting. So here you can see I'm filling in the background of the picture with black, filling in the clothing, because I don't usually use clothing with just a pretty standard gray. And then what I do is I'll pick two kind of contrasting colors. So usually it's like red and blue, or green and red, or purple and yellow, something like that. And if it's like a front leg versus a rear leg, one will be red, one will be green. In this case, we're doing, I think, blue and red. So defining features can be one color, and secondary features can be a second color. Or you can do what I do sometimes, which is just be artistic with it. Contrast different parts of the body with other colors. It doesn't have to be super specific. It doesn't have to be anything other than what you want it to be. Personally, I like the way that reds and blues look together. So I'll take red and blue and just kind of contrast them together, and I end up with this pretty cool looking drawing in the end. At least I think it is. So I appreciate you listening or watching, whatever you're doing. As far as where you can find me on the Floor Rejects on YouTube, on your podcasting apps of choice, or you can find me on Etsy at the Floor Rejects too. But in either case, I appreciate you listening, I appreciate you watching, and I will talk to you guys next time. Bye.